What's up everybody, welcome back. So in this video we're going to start working on our AI. We're going to start out pretty simple, set up the basics and make sure they can navigate the level so they can find us. And at the end of the video it will look something like this. Then I also want to announce a little mini series that I'm going to be doing about the Lyra weapon FX. So we're going to take a look at migrating the FX into your project and then fixing all the errors that will occur. And then how you can set them up to use in your own project. And the final thing I want to mention is you can now become a member of the channel and you will get a special membership badge, access to the premium channels in the Discord and some premium content as well. So if you would like to join the channel, you can do so today. So without further ado, let's start working on our AI. Like most of the time, I have a few small fixes that I want to take a look at from the previous videos. So if we go into the widgets folder and open our loadout menu, so if we are in game and we actually enter the menu for a second time when we left the menu with a selected weapon, the weapon will still be in the slot. So if we want to fix that, we need to go into the event graph and look for our event construct. And then all the way at the end, we do call the update weapon info for the equipped weapon. And we need to make sure that we also make a call for the selected weapon. So we're going to drag in another one of these function calls and then simply make sure it's for the selected weapon. So set it to false and get rid of the weapon row name. So this way, this will clear the selected weapon info card. And by calling these functions, this will also update our weapon row names for the equipped and the selected weapon. So this will make sure that everything is working again in the loadout menu. So that's good to go. And there is one other thing in the characters folder in the XP component. So if we open up our XP component, we have a function over here and that's called add XP. And I would like to rename it to component add XP because I'm also using an add XP function in the interface. So we're going to rename this to component add XP to avoid some confusion. And then over here we have the update PlayerController profile function. And if we open this one up, we need to replace this with the setMember struct. So right now we are not passing on the weapon loadout and the weapon inventory. So if we save our XP, our loadout and weapons will actually be reset. So we're going to fix that. Let's get rid of these nodes. And we're going to drag off the PlayerController and simply get our profile. And then we want to set the members in structure. So set members. And all we need to expose here are the player XP and the player level. And then we're going to hook them up. And that should fix the issue over here. So that's good to go as well. And those are all the fixes I had. So that wasn't too bad. Now, to start with the AI, you're gonna need some characters and animations. So I downloaded the Minions pack from Epic. It's from the marketplace. It's a free pack. They come with quite a lot of models. They have quite a lot of animations. They have ranged and melee enemies. So I think it's a pretty nice pack and it covers pretty much all we need in one pack. So that's why I'm using this one. If you would like to join the tutorial, you could download this one and work along. So make sure you install it and then we're going to dive into setting things up. So with the characters in place, let's quickly take a look at the folders. So I'm going to go to characters, minions, and then I'm going to use a dusk minion. So open this one, meshes. So I'm going to pick the minion lane melee core dusk. You can pick any of the melee ones, to be honest, because they share the same skeleton. So I'm going to open up this one and make sure that I know which skeleton it's using. So over here, I'm going to click the skeleton tab and then make sure I remember this name over here. So minion lane core skeleton. And then we can get out of here and I'm going to create a new folder to start setting up our AI. So I'm going to call this AI. And first we need to make sure that this guy can actually run around in the level. So let's start creating a blend space. So let's go to animation and we're going to make a blend space one-dimensional. So over here we need to select the skeleton. This was our minion lane core skeleton. So select that one. And then this is going to be my blend space AI minion melee. And let's open this up. Now we need to set up the axis for the blend space. So on here on the left side, horizontal axis, we can set it up. We're going to name this our speed, and then we're going to set the value from 0 to something like 800. And then over here in the graph, we need to define which animation belongs to which speed. So I'm going to grab the correct names from my example project, because the naming can be pretty confusing with all of these animations in here. So for the idle, I got the non-combat idle, so that would be this one. So we're going to drag this in all the way to the left, then it's on spot 0 over here. Then for the second one, I'm using the jog forward animation, so we're going to look for jog forward. And I'm actually using combat jog forward aggro minion, so this one. I'm going to drag it in somewhere around the middle. So that's around 400. And then for the last one, we're going to be using the non-combat jog forward B. So that's the lower one over here. And this is a faster one, so we're going to put this all the way to the right. Now, there is a new functionality in Unreal Engine which will allow you to analyze these animations, and it will try to put them at the correct spot in the graph, so you have a minimal amount of foot sliding. So if we look over here on the left side, we can set the horizontal axis function. So if we expand this, we can set it to the locomotion, because we're going to use this for our locomotion. And then we can expand it further. And over here we can set up some sockets. So we need to define which bones are the feet. So we can simply call this our foot left. And then for the other one, it's going to be our foot right. And then we make sure our axes are correct. So the character is facing forward on the plus Y, that's correct. And up is plus Z, so that's correct as well. Now if we click the little analyze button over here and look at the graph, you will see the animations changed position. So it put them in the place where they probably belong. So this would be somewhere around speed 700, and the running animation would be 425, somewhere around. So this is a nice little feature to help you put the animations in the correct place. So we have a blend space set up. Let's save this and we can close it down, and then we can start creating our animation blueprint. So let's right click and go to animation again, and we're going to create an animation blueprint. So we need to select our skeleton. It's our minion lane core skeleton, and create it. So this is our animation blueprint, AI minion melee. And let's open this up. Now first of all, we're going to set up the event graph, the animation graph. So this is going to be pretty simple. We're going to drag in our blend space from the asset browser over here. And then all we need to do is plug it into the output pose and get the speed variable. So we're going to right click and promote this to a variable. And that should be good to go. So we can compile, and then normally we would go to the event graph and set it up over here. But in Unreal Engine 5 we have a new feature called Blueprint Thread Save Update Animation. So on the left side over here, if you go to Functions and then Override, you can override the Thread Save Update Animation function. So if you select it, it will create a new function for us. And I'm going to try and explain what this actually does, and I'm going to use the explanation from the Lyra starter games, because the people that created this are probably better at explaining it than I am. So normally the animation blueprint logic runs on the event graph, and that runs on the main game thread. And every animation blueprint must be run in order for the animations to update, and that needs to be done on the game thread. So that can be a real bottleneck if you have a lot of animation blueprints and if you have a lot of stuff in your event graph. So this new blueprint thread save update animation allows it to run on a worker thread parallel to the game thread. So this removes the load on the game thread, but there is a downside to it, because we cannot directly access variables and properties from here. So if we would simply grab our character and store it as a variable on the event graph, then we cannot go into the thread save update animation, get our character, and then get a variable from our character, because that's not considered thread safe. So in here we can pretty much only use our property access and do mat and that kind of stuff. So that's in a nutshell what the thread save update animation is. We're going to start setting it up pretty basic right now, and during the series we're going to expand on it, and it should become a little bit more clear as well. Now to start this, we want to go to the class settings and make sure that we have our multi-threaded update animation selected. So this should be enabled. And then we also have a checkbox here we can enable that will warn us if we use things that aren't thread safe. So the compiler will try to pick them up and warn you when you compile the blueprint. There's also an option in the project settings called multi-threaded update animation, and you need to make sure that's enabled as well, and it should be by default. But if you have any issues, make sure you go to your project settings and then look for the setting over there. So those should be enabled, and then we can use it. And how we're going to use it is in the following way. So we're going to get a setter for our speed, and then we're going to simply right click in an empty spot, and we can look for our property access system. And with the property access, we can go to our pawn owner and then simply get the velocity from the pawn owner over here. And we want to get the vector length. And we're going to use vector length XY, so we're not going to use the Z value. And then we're going to plug this into our speed, and that should be good to go. So we can access our property access, and we can get a lot of stuff from here. The only downside is these aren't characters that are cast, for example. So you can't get any character specific variables like this. So we have this set up, and this is really basic, but as I mentioned, as the series continues, we're going to expand on this. So we have an animation blueprint good to go as well. Now let's start setting up the rest of our AI. So first of all, I'm going to create an AI controller. I'm not sure if we're actually going to use it in this episode, but it's just pretty much some default setup for AI. So I just want to get this out of the way. So let's go to the blueprint class, and then over here, if you expand all classes, we can search for the AI controller. And we're going to select the normal one and then create it. So this is going to be my blueprint AI controller base. And we don't really need to do anything with it yet, so just make sure it's here. And then we're going to right click again and go to blueprint class, and this time we're going to create a new character. And this is going to be our minion base character, so blueprint AI minion base. And let's open this one up. So if we have our class default selected, on the right side over here we can set up some defaults. So we want to make sure that we have the auto possess AI set to placed in world or spawned, so both of the options. And then we can set the AI controller over here. So we're going to immediately set it to our AI controller base, so we have that out of the way. Then we can set up the viewport. So for the mesh, we're going to set our correct mesh, which was the minion lane melee core. So let's look for melee core. And then we have core dusk. So that's the correct one. Now let's make sure it's somewhat aligned. Let me see. Somewhere like this. Then for this mesh, we need to set up an animation blueprint. So on the right side over here, animation mode, animation blueprint, and then the animation class, that's going to be animation blueprint AI minion melee. And the last thing we can set up over here in the character defaults is the character movement speed. So if you select the character movement component, then on the right side, the maximum walk speed is the default maximum speed. So I'm just going to lower it a little bit. So I'm going to set it to 420. That was about the speed of the running animation in the BlendSpace. So that's set as well. These are pretty much all the defaults we have to cover. So now we can dive into the event graph and actually start setting them up. So first of all, let's dive into the event graph. You can get rid of all of the default events that are in here, and we are going to use event possessed. So look for event possessed. Now this executes on the server, and since we are an AI, I want the server to be in control of most of my behavior anyway. So this is why I'm grabbing my event possessed. Then I don't have to deal with waits because my character isn't possessed yet as well. So this seems like a safe option to me. So I'm going to drag off the new controller and cast it to my AI base controller. So make sure you cast it to the base controller you just created and not to the default AI controller. And then we want to promote this to a variable. So that's good to go and we can use it later. So I already did this once before. So let me get rid of this. Yes, bye. And then we're going to use this. Okay. So now we're going to create some logic for every character that spawned. So let's create a new custom event and we're going to call this onAISpawned. And in here we want to grab all of the enemies and pick one. So we're going to get all of the players and make sure that we select one that is going to be our target. So we're going to create a new function for that and that's called findEnemy. And let's open it up. Now, because we have a multiplayer game, we want to divide the attention of our AI in between our players. So we do not have one player that's chased by all of the enemies and the other players have none. So let's make sure we do that. We're going to grab get all actors of class and we're going to find all of the players in the map. So we're going to look for our hero base characters. Then let's promote this to a local variable. So this is our all players array, local all players. And then we want to know if this is empty or not. So let's grab a branch and make sure it's not empty. So drag off here is not empty and hook it up to the branch. And then let me grab my notes. Okay, so we're going to grab another branch over here, hook this up to the true pin. So if it's not empty, then we want to know if it's maybe 1. So let's grab the array again and we're going to drag off here and is equal to 1. We need to get the length to make sure we can compare it. So get the array length and then plug that in here and we want to know if it's equal to 1, plug it into the branch. So if it's equal to 1, we only have one player to choose from, so that's going to be very simple. So let's create a second local variable and we're going to call this local is valid player found. Is valid player found. So we can drag this in here, connect this up to the true pin, set it to true, and then we want to set our new enemy. So we're going to create another local variable and that's our local new enemy. And this is a hero base character. And then we can set that over here as well. So we're going to set it and then grab all of our local players and get the only one in here. So get a copy of index 0 and that's going to be our target. So over here, if the array is empty, then we do not have a valid player. So we can simply drag in our boolean, connect this up to the false pin of the first branch. So the is not empty and make sure that we set this to false. Then we can return from here. So let's grab this and grab a return node and we can hook this up over here as well. And then for the actual logic that we're going to use, we're going to grab a for each loop in here and hook it up to the false pin. And we're going to loop through all of our players. So grab the local array, plug it in here. And for this we need to create a variable on the character. So let's close it down and go to our character folder, open up our hero base character. And in here I'm going to create a new variable and that's called a number of AI attackers. So let's just create one over here, number AI attackers. And that's an integer. Compile and save it. And now if we go back into our AI minion base, then what we can do is grab all of those numbers. So we can make another array of this and that's also a local variable. So let's create it, local all attacker numbers. It doesn't really matter. So make this an array of integers. And we want to store all of these player values in the same order. So we're going to simply drag in the array and we're going to grab an add node, plug it in over here. Make sure you connect the array index to the actual. No, that's not correct. So we're going to grab the array element and then get the AI number attackers and plug this in over here. So we're going to add this value to the array. and it's going to have the same order as the player array. So if this is done, then we can grab this same array again, and we can use a function called minimum int in array. So over here. And what this will do, it will look for the index with the lowest value in the array, and it will return that index. So that will return over here, and the actual value that's in the index will return over here. So what we can do now is grab another local variable, local lowest index, and set it over here. So hook this up to the completed pin, and then the lowest index is the index of the minimum value. Oh, this doesn't need to be an array, so make sure this is a single variable, and then hook up the index of the minimum value to this one. So we want to make sure that this is not -1. So if you look at the description, returns a value of 0 and index -1 if the array is empty. So we want to make sure it's not empty. So we're going to grab a branch, plug it in here. If our local lowest index is not -1, equal to, and then plug it in the branch. So if this is false, so if it is -1, we do not have a valid enemy, so we can plug in our boolean, set it to false, and then go back to our return node. And if this is true, then we can actually select an enemy, so we're going to use the index from that array to pick the actual enemy. So we're going to grab all of our local players, and we're simply going to get a copy from the lowest index, plug that in over here. So this is going to be our local new enemy. So plug in the result into a setter for the local new enemy. Then we can drag in the bool as well and set it to true, because we did find the player this time. And then we also want to make sure that we increase the number of AI attackers. So we can drag off the local all player, and over here we can actually get AI number of attackers. Get the number of AI attackers, there it is, and we can increment this, so we're going to add 1 to it and then plug it in over here. So this will simply keep count of the amount of enemies that are tracking me. And make sure we plug it into the return node. That's good to go. And then we want to return some values, so we're going to return the bool if we found an enemy or not. Plug it into the return node, and we also want to return the actual enemy, so let's drag it in as well and plug it in over here. So let's clean up the names a little bit. So this is our function that will find our current enemy. So go back to the event graph, and then we can call that function. So let me check my notes. We're going to drag it in over here, find enemy, plug it in, and we want to make sure that we actually found something. So we're going to grab a branch over here, hook it up, and if we didn't found something, we're going to add a little wait and then try again. So let's add a delay of something about half a second, 0.5, and then simply loop back through the beginning. So we're going to keep doing this until we found a valid enemy. And if we actually found an enemy, then we're going to set it. So let's drag off the new enemy, and this is going to be my target player. So promote to variable, target player. And that should be good. So hook this up to the true pin. And then all we need to do here is add an event that will make sure that we start walking towards the player. So let's do that right away. Let's create a new custom event. Call this move to player. And in here, let's first add a branch to check if we are alive. So we're going to create a new boolean, and we're going to call it isAlive. Make sure it's a bool and plug it in over here, so we can use that later. And then we want to drag over and get an AI move to node. So get AI move to, this one. And then you want to drag in the actual pawn, so that's a reference to ourself. You do need to make sure you hook this up, otherwise it doesn't work. And for the target actor, we're going to plug in our target player over here. So you can increase the acceptance radius a little bit so the AI doesn't bump into the player that much. So I'm going to set it to 100. And then I'm going to drag off the on success and the on fail and plug both of them into a delay. I'm going to set the delay to about 2 seconds. And when the delay is done, I'm going to simply call the function again. So move to player. So this is a really simple loop right now to simply make the AI target us constantly. So we're going to call this move to player function over here. And that should make him move towards us. So compile and save this. And I think that should be good to go. So let's set up our navigation mesh. So we can close this down. And we want to open up our map. So I'm going to go to the maps folder, map 01. And also grab myself a viewport. And now to make the AI able to walk around in the level, we need to add a NavMesh. So look for NavMesh over here, and you want to add the NavMeshBoundsVolume. So you can simply drag it into your map over here. And then you want to make sure that it actually expands your entire map. So if you have your viewport open and you press P, then you can actually see where the NavMesh is being generated. And that's where your AI is able to walk. So right now we want to make sure that we increase this a lot. So in the details panel you can simply set the size and you will see the mesh increase as it goes. So this should be somewhere around here maybe. So we have 8,500. And then make sure you set the correct height, so something like that. So everything where it is green right now, you can see our characters can walk, or our AI can walk. So this is a pretty important step in making sure your AI can follow you. And if you have the NavMesh in your level, you can select the recast NavMesh default in your outliner. And in here you can set all kinds of options for the navigation mesh as well. So you can scroll through here and have a look at what you can set up. So let's do some final setup to test if this is working. First, let's make sure we have a few of the enemies in the map. So let's open up our level and let's simply drag in a few of the AI minion base characters. So I'm gonna put a few of them quite close together because I can then show something else a little bit later as well. So we have 4 characters in here and that should be good. Now we need to go back into our character blueprint, and in here we need to make sure that we call our onAI spawned event. So for the event possessed on the end, we're gonna call onAI spawned. And we also created a boolean in here called isAlive, and by default our character is alive, so we want to make sure we set the default to true. And then I think we should be good to go. So if we test this right now, just hit solo game, why not? And there we go. We have our enemies and they are following us around the map. So that seems to be working. And now there's one thing you can see, they are grouping up quite close to each other, and they pretty much well bump into each other all the time. So that's not really how you want it to be probably. And there is a pretty easy way to fix that. So this is just because I was loading a solo game and the HUD isn't initiated yet, so that's not a big deal. So if we want to set up avoidance, we can go into the character movement component, and on the right side, if we scroll all the way down, somewhere around here we have character movement avoidance, and you can choose to use RVO-Avoidance. So if you select this, then you can set the radius for each character, and that radius they will try to stay clear of each other. So I can set this to something like 120. They are quite beefy characters. And then in the advanced section you could set up some groups, so we don't really need to do this, but you can see this character belongs to group 0, and the groups he is avoiding are all of the other groups, and you can also set up groups to ignore. So you can make this a little bit more advanced if you want to. Right now that's not really needed, so all we're going to do is select use RVO-Avoidance and then use a radius of around 120. And if I go in game and test again, then now you will see they try to stay clear of each other a little bit better, so that looks a little bit neater. So that's the AI basics that we have going. In the next video we're gonna start setting up the shooting so we can actually take them down, and we're gonna continue from there. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please consider leaving a like, and I'll be back for more soon. Thanks, later.